The midnight knock. Rain shrouded the night in a steady whisper, wrapping the lonely ranch in its endless sigh. The distant mountains were silhouettes against a bruised sky, and the old windmill groaned like a creature in pain. Inside, Ethan Cole sat by the dying fire, cradling a fragile kitten against his chest. Its ribs trembled beneath the thin fur, every breath a soft plea for warmth. He had found it that morning, half buried in mud near the barn, its eyes glazed but defiant. The kitten's frailty mirrored his own, two survivors in a house where silence had long become a language. A sudden knock cut through the rain. 3 quick raps, urgent, uncertain. Ethan stiffened. No one came here at this hour, not since his wife's passing 2 years ago. The ranch had been his refuge and his prison, both built from memory. He hesitated, setting the kitten on a folded blanket by the hearth before reaching for the door latch. When the door opened, the storm pushed a figure into the light. She was soaked through, hair clinging to her cheeks, coat plastered against her body, a small suitcase trembling in her grip. Her voice, when it came, was soft yet firm, shaped by an accent that carried faraway sorrow. "Mr. Cole? I'm Lena. The agency sent me. I came for the cleaning work." Ethan blinked, half convinced she was a dream pulled from exhaustion. He had forgotten a message he'd sent weeks ago, an ad for help that he never expected anyone to answer, especially not at midnight. "You came all this way tonight?" His voice cracked from disuse. "The roads might close tomorrow," she said simply. "I didn't want to lose the chance." For a long moment, neither moved. Rain streaked her face, glistening under the lantern glow. She looked like someone who had fought too long against life's tide, yet still refused to sink. Ethan saw something familiar in her, loss shaped into endurance. He stepped aside wordlessly, motioning her in. The warmth of the room enveloped her, faint and smoky. She removed her shoes, setting them neatly by the mat, eyes sweeping across the sparse interior. The worn armchair, the stack of unopened letters, the photo frame turned backward on the mantel. Then her gaze caught on the kitten curled by the fire. "Oh," she whispered, crouching beside it. "He's starving." Ethan nodded. "Found him this morning. Guess we both needed something small to keep alive." She smiled faintly, the first trace of softness between them. From her bag, she pulled a scrap of bread, broke it into pieces, and offered it gently. The kitten nibbled weakly, its tiny tongue brushing her fingertips. The gesture stirred something Ethan hadn't felt in years, a quiet warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. Lena rose, glancing toward him. "May I start working tonight? I won't sleep much anyway." "You don't have to," he said, almost awkwardly. "It's late." "I prefer to move," she replied. "It keeps the thoughts away." Her words hung in the air, simple but heavy with meaning. Without waiting for his permission, she began tidying the room, her movements efficient yet graceful. Each sweep of the rag, each lifted chair leg, seemed to restore a kind of forgotten rhythm to the place. Ethan watched quietly, uncertain whether to feel gratitude or guilt for letting her disturb the dust of his solitude. When she reached the mantel, her hand hovered over the backward photo frame. She didn't turn it, but she looked at it for a long moment, as if sensing the grief sealed within. "I'm sorry for your loss," she murmured. Ethan's chest tightened. "How did you?" "Widows recognize each other," she said softly. He said nothing more. The fire crackled, the rain deepened outside. After some time, she finished folding the cleaning cloth neatly beside the sink. Her clothes were still damp, her hair clinging to her neck. Ethan fetched an old blanket and handed it to her. "There's a small room down the hall," he said. "It isn't much, but it's dry." She accepted it with a small bow. "Thank you, Mr. Cole." As she turned to leave, the kitten meowed weakly. Lena knelt again, tucking the blanket closer around it before standing. The sight lingered in Ethan's mind long after she disappeared down the hallway. The gentleness of her hands, the silent steadiness of her presence. He sat by the fire again, staring into the shifting embers. The storm outside seemed to fade into a dull hum, yet his thoughts grew louder. There was something unsettling in the quiet after her arrival, as if the air itself had changed shape. For the first time in months, The house didn't feel entirely empty. When he rose later to check the locks, he noticed the blanket draped across his shoulders, a small kindness he didn't remember accepting. He glanced toward the hallway where her light still glowed faintly under the door. The kitten stirred beside the hearth, purring weakly, its small body pressing against his boot. Ethan smiled faintly and whispered, "Guess we're not alone anymore." Outside, the rain slowed to a steady patter, like a heartbeat. And somewhere down the hall, a woman who had lost everything finally closed her eyes in a stranger's home, unaware that the first knock of midnight had already begun to rewrite both their lives. Nights of warmth and guilt. The first days passed quietly, marked by the sound of rain and the creak of the old ranch settling into morning. Lena moved through the house like a careful ghost, her hands cleaning, mending, and tending to what life remained within its walls. She rose before dawn, swept the ashes from the hearth, and brewed tea with a precision that made Ethan wonder what kind of life she'd left behind. Ethan spent most of his hours in the barn, mending fences or checking the feed. Yet every evening, he found himself lingering near the porch when the lamps glowed behind the kitchen curtains. Through the window, he could see Lena moving in rhythm, quiet, patient, graceful in a way that unsettled him. She never spoke much, yet her presence softened the emptiness that had once hung thick around him. The kitten, now stronger, had become her companion. It followed her from room to room, curling at her feet when she paused to rest. Ethan sometimes watched her kneel to feed it warm milk, her expression tender but shadowed with something deeper, a sorrow she never spoke of. One evening, as the sun sank into a copper haze, Ethan found her outside repairing the fence near the paddock. Her hands were raw from work, her thin coat fluttering in the cold wind. He approached, holding 2 mugs of tea. "You don't need to do that," he said, offering one to her. "It can wait till morning." She accepted the mug, fingers brushing his briefly. "I like to finish what I start." They stood side by side, the fence stretching before them like a border between solitude and connection. The silence was not heavy this time. It breathed with the rhythm of 2 people unlearning how to be alone. Ethan took a slow sip, then said, "You work harder than anyone I've met." "I've had to," she replied simply. "When my husband died, I thought I couldn't go on. But I have my daughter. I still have her, even if I can't see her right now." He turned toward her. "She's far, with my sister in the city," Lena said, her eyes fixed on the darkening horizon. "She's 8. Her name is May. I came here so I could send money for her schooling." There was pride in her tone, but also an ache Ethan recognized too well. He thought of his late wife, Lila, whose laughter still lingered in the cracks of the house. Grief, he realized, was a language Lena spoke fluently, perhaps more clearly than he did. The wind rose, carrying the smell of rain. A storm was forming again. Ethan gestured toward the house. "Come inside before it breaks." By the time they reached the porch, the first drops began to fall. The kitten darted between their feet, mewing for warmth. Inside, Lena set it near the fire, while Ethan placed a kettle on the stove. The small space filled with the scent of tea leaves and smoke. As thunder rolled, Lena flinched. Ethan noticed the tremor and asked softly, "You don't like storms?" She shook her head, managing a faint smile. "They remind me of the night my husband died. The roof of our house collapsed. It was raining like this." The words came out quietly, like confession. Ethan froze, unsure how to respond. He wanted to offer comfort, but knew too well that pity was a poor salve. So he did what felt right. He sat beside her on the floor, close enough for the warmth of their shoulders to touch. For a long moment, they said nothing. The storm raged outside, but inside the fire painted soft light across their faces. Ethan's gaze fell on her hands, thin, scarred, and trembling slightly as she held her cup. He reached out, instinctively steadying it. She didn't pull away. Something fragile passed between them, an understanding, a spark neither of them meant to ignite. He felt it in the stillness, in the way her breath caught and her eyes darted toward the floor. She rose suddenly, placing the cup aside. "I should check the windows," she said quickly. Ethan stood too. "Lena." Her name on his tongue felt dangerous, intimate. She turned, meeting his gaze just long enough for the truth to pass unspoken between them. Then she left the room, her footsteps fading down the hall. Ethan sat back down, the kitten curling into his lap as if sensing his turmoil. His heart thudded with a rhythm he hadn't felt since before Lila died. He told himself it was nothing, loneliness playing tricks on a tired man, but the warmth where her shoulder had brushed his refused to fade. Later that night, when he checked the doors, he found a folded cloth on the table. She had cleaned the mud from his coat and left it there, neatly pressed. A small note rested beside it. "Thank you for the tea." He stood there a long time, staring at the careful handwriting. Outside, the storm softened to drizzle. Inside, guilt and longing settled in equal measure, neither strong enough to drive the other away. In the corner, the kitten purred, unaware of the storm it had helped awaken between its two rescuers. The forbidden night. The storm came without warning, angry, violent, and unrelenting. Wind clawed at the shutters, rain lashed the windows, and thunder cracked across the open fields like a curse. By sundown, the power lines had fallen. The ranch was plunged into darkness, save for the trembling flame of a single candle burning on the kitchen table. Lina sat near the fire, her face lit by its soft glow. The kitten slept beside her, curled on a folded towel. She listened to the storm's howl and felt an unease deeper than fear. It wasn't just the wind or the cold. It was the way the silence inside seemed to echo with things unspoken. Ethan entered quietly, carrying a lantern that flickered with every gust. His shirt was damp, his boots heavy with mud. "The fence is down," he said. "Cattle are safe, but the road's gone under." Lina nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "We're cut off." He set the lantern beside the fire and knelt to warm his hands. For a while, neither spoke. The air between them shimmered with tension, something fragile, growing heavier with every minute. Lina broke the silence first. "I can fix some soup. It will help the cold." Ethan watched her move through the dim light, her shadow gliding across the walls. Each motion, lifting the pot, stirring the broth, felt measured, deliberate. She wasn't just cooking. She was trying to fill the silence with something safer than the truth. He took a seat across from her, eyes tracing the faint lines of exhaustion on her face. "You shouldn't work so hard tonight," he said gently. "You've done enough." "I don't know what to do when I stop," she replied, not looking up. Her words struck him deeper than he expected. He understood them perfectly. After his wife's death, stillness had been unbearable, because stillness meant remembering. When the soup was done, she poured it into 2 bowls and joined him at the small table. The candlelight flickered between them like a nervous heartbeat. Steam rose from the bowls, carrying the scent of ginger and rice. They ate in silence until Ethan said quietly, "I used to sit like this with my wife. She made soup when storms came through." Lina looked up, her eyes glistening. "Do you still think of her?" "Every day," he admitted. "But lately, I don't know what's worse, remembering her or feeling her fade." Her lips parted, but she said nothing. The candlelight caught in her eyes, and for the first time, Ethan saw not just sorrow, but longing, an ache that mirrored his own. The wind wailed, and a branch struck the roof. The kitten stirred, mewing softly before settling again. Lina stood, carrying their empty bowls to the sink. When she turned back, he was still watching her. Something in his gaze made her breath falter. "You should rest," she said, her voice trembling. "I can't," he replied. "Not tonight." The fire hissed as rain leaked through the chimney. She hesitated, then walked closer, drawn by a force she didn't fully understand. The flicker of the flame painted them both in gold and shadow. "Why did you hire me, Mr. Cole?" she asked suddenly. He swallowed. "Because I was tired of being alone." She exhaled slowly. "And now?" He met her eyes, his voice low. "Now I don't know how to stop wanting to feel alive again." For a long moment, nothing existed but the storm and their breathing. Then she stepped closer. The distance between them, so carefully guarded for weeks, dissolved. Her hand brushed his arm, tentative, questioning. He didn't move away. The warmth of her touch spread through him like fire after a long winter. His fingers found hers, rough calluses meeting soft skin. No words followed. They didn't need them. The silence said everything. The grief, the need, the guilt, the terrible relief of human closeness. The candle guttered, nearly dying, then flared again. Outside, thunder rolled across the hills, drowning the soft sound of her breath as she leaned into him. The moment wasn't born of desire alone, but of two souls, too tired of mourning. He buried his face against her shoulder, and she closed her eyes. For that instant, there were no ghosts, only warmth and the fragile illusion that pain could be replaced by touch. When the storm began to fade, they sat apart again, both staring into the dying fire. Neither spoke. The kitten crawled into Lena's lap, purring faintly, unaware of the invisible line that had been crossed. She wrapped her arms around it, her face pale. "I shouldn't have stayed," she whispered. Ethan's voice was hoarse. "I shouldn't have let you." Outside, the rain slowed to a drizzle. Dawn was still far off, but a pale light began to edge the windows. The storm had passed, yet its echo lingered, in the damp air, in the trembling of their hands, in the silence that now carried shame instead of comfort. Lena rose without looking at him. "I'll clean up," she murmured. He wanted to stop her, to apologize, but the words refused to come. There was no way to name what had just happened without breaking it further. As she moved away, her shadow passed over the kitten, over the fire, over the space between them that would never again be the same. Ethan remained by the hearth, staring into the embers until they turned cold. He knew that when morning came, the world outside might look unchanged, but inside the house, something irreparable had begun. And somewhere deep within both of them, love and guilt had found the same heartbeat. Dawn of regret and redemption. Dawn arrived quietly, soft and pale, brushing the ranch with hesitant light. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world washed clean yet heavy with aftermath. Water pooled in the ruts of the dirt road, the fences leaned, and the air smelled of earth and ash. Inside the house, everything was still, except for the faint sound of Lena packing her small suitcase. She folded her clothes with slow precision, her hands trembling only once when she touched the thin blanket Ethan had given her on that first night. She pressed it briefly to her chest, then set it aside. The kitten watched from the windowsill, blinking at her as if it understood. Down the hall, Ethan sat at the kitchen table, his fingers wrapped around a mug of cold coffee. He hadn't slept. The fire had long gone out, but its memory still flickered in his mind. The warmth, the light, her touch. He wanted to tell himself it had been a mistake, that loneliness had played tricks on them both, but lies had never come easily to him. When Lena entered, he stood too quickly, almost knocking over the chair. For a moment, neither spoke. She looked smaller in the morning light, fragile yet resolute, her eyes red from sleeplessness. "You're leaving," he said finally. "I have to," she replied softly. "My work here is done. You don't have to go today. The roads are still flooded. I'll walk if I must." The words were gentle, but final. She placed a sealed envelope on the table, her pay untouched. "I can't take this," she said. "I came to work, not to," she trailed off, unable to finish. Ethan looked at the envelope, then at her. "I don't want your forgiveness," he said. "But don't leave thinking you meant nothing." Her expression wavered, and for an instant, the distance between them shrank. "You're a good man, Ethan," she said quietly. "But we both betrayed something we promised to love. You, your wife. Me, my husband's memory. That's not nothing." Her words were not cruel, only honest. They hung in the air like smoke that refused to fade. Outside, the sun rose higher, gilding the fields in gold. The kitten jumped down and brushed against Lena's leg, mewing softly. She bent to lift it, cradling its tiny body against her chest. "He's stronger now," she murmured. "He doesn't need me anymore." "Neither do I," Ethan asked before he could stop himself. Lena looked at him, then really looked at him, and something in her gaze softened. "You do," she said, "but not in the way you think. You need to forgive yourself, not replace your grief with someone else's." He turned away, ashamed. The truth in her voice stung deeper than any accusation. She set the kitten gently on the floor. It padded toward Ethan, circling his boots, purring. He crouched to stroke it, his rough hand trembling as he whispered, "Looks like he's chosen to stay." Lena smiled faintly, the expression small but sincere. "Then maybe he'll remind you that life still needs tending." She moved toward the door, her suitcase in hand. The moment stretched painfully, filled with everything they would never say. "Lena," Ethan said at last, "will you write to me? Let me know how your daughter is." She hesitated. "Maybe," she said, "if I think of the ranch and it doesn't hurt." He nodded, accepting the quiet sentence for what it was, a gentle farewell disguised as possibility. The door creaked open, spilling sunlight across the worn floorboards. She stepped out, the hem of her coat brushing the threshold. The wind carried the scent of wet grass and distant lilacs. Ethan followed her onto the porch. The horizon shimmered, endless and empty. Lena turned once, meeting his eyes one last time. "Take care of the kitten," she said. "And yourself." Then she walked down the muddy road, her figure growing smaller with every step until the fog swallowed her completely. Ethan stood there long after she disappeared, the kitten mewing softly beside his boot. The morning felt too bright, too quiet. He returned inside and found the blanket she had left folded on the chair. For a moment, he pressed it to his face, breathing in the faint trace of lavender soap. Then, moving slowly, he crossed the room to the mantel. The photograph of Lila still lay face down. He picked it up, wiped the dust from the glass, and studied her smile, warm, unburdened, untouched by the loneliness that had followed her death. "I loved you," he whispered, "but I have to let you rest." He turned the frame upright and placed it beside the window where the light could reach it again. The kitten jumped onto the sill, curling beside the photo as though keeping watch. Outside, the ranch stretched toward the horizon, vast and waiting. Ethan exhaled, the breath long and steady, and felt, perhaps for the first time in years, that he could breathe without guilt. Somewhere far down the road, Lena stopped and looked back once. The ranch was only a distant shape now, but in her heart it remained, a place of mistakes, of kindness, and of fragile redemption. She reached into her pocket and unfolded a small scrap of paper. It was a child's drawing, a stick-figure mother and daughter holding hands beneath a bright sun. May's handwriting beneath it read, "Come home soon." Lena smiled through tears, folded the paper carefully, and began walking again. Behind her, the wind swept across the fields, carrying away the remnants of a storm and leaving behind only light. The kitten meowed once more, a small sound of life echoing through the quiet house. Ethan lifted his head toward the open window where the dawn poured in. He didn't call her name. He simply whispered, "Thank you." And for the first time in a long while, the silence that followed did not hurt.